Hey everyone, I'm back, and this week the film that I've seen is Valerian and the Thousand Planets, and it came out about a week or so after it came out in the rest of the world, and so by the time you're watching this, we already know this is probably the biggest bomb of the US summer and cost about 200 million to make and has grossed maybe 89 million globally and basically nothing in America. So what went wrong? We're going to talk a little bit about whether you should go see it, and we're going to talk about then the plot and spoilers. But the first thing I would say is Luc Besson is one of the greatest filmmakers ever. Just La Femme Nikita is enough to put him in the highest levels. And he's also got Leon the Professional, The Big Blue. He's really done some incredible work. So then you go to his more fun work, and you'd think of films like The Fifth Element especially, which seems to be almost a precursor to Valerian, and works like Lucy, which is kind of somewhere in the middle. So what I would say, because I'm just going to end this before I move on to the plot, is if you like The Fifth Element, go and see this film. Because you are obviously the kind of person who really enjoys his visual style. It's over the top. He always has a really different take on the world, and it's a much more Eurocentric view than the typical American. And he always does something interesting. So you can't miss a Luc Besson movie. You have to see it because he's always doing something visually pleasing and sometimes narratively. So I guess what I would say is if you like The Fifth Element, go see this film. If not, probably catch it a bit later, and then you can maybe make up your own mind on DVD or something like that. Okay, so I'll come back in a second and we'll talk about the film. Okay, so let's talk about Valerian and Thousand Planets. So the first thing I think you need to have at the back of your mind is this film owes a lot to its original sources. So it's based on a comic book called Valerian and Laureline. And in fact, they made up the name Laureline, which I love, never existed before. And the two guys who made that comic were French artists, and I'll just read their names, Pierre Christine and Jean-Claude Mézières. And that comic book has been quoted by many people as being the source for a lot of Besson's work, especially The Fifth Element, George Lucas with Star Wars. It really was this landmark in taking what were comic books and making them a lot more adult. And it started in 1967 and went to 2010. So that's a long time. But looking at the Valerian plot line, it's based on one of the stories, which I can't remember the exact name, but I think it's The Hidden Ambassadors or something like that. And I'm not a huge comic book guy, but I just knew from general knowledge kind of this legendary French comic book. And so they've just taken one story out of it, but the reason why I'm raising that is there are certain things which I am not sure going on in the film. So for a film which is made in 2017, it's got some real issues, and we'll get to those in a little while, but I keep thinking, what is part of the comic book and what has Luc Besson added? And I'm not quite sure, but we'll get to that in a second, because Valerian and Laureline, in the comic books, Valerian is a major, in the movie he's a major, but he is really a bit of an idiot, a lunk, really macho and makes bad decisions. He's always following the orders, even when they're morally suspect. And actually, he does a lot of action. He's always with the women and stuff. And you kind of think back, well, that's probably not too bad for the 70s. Then they introduced Laureline, who a lot of people wouldn't know. In the comic books, Valerian finds Laureline in the 1100s. She's a French peasant, and she works out he's a time traveler. he brings her back to whatever it is, the 2300s, and trains her as this secret agent, and then they kind of go off. And then she's actually the brains of the operation. She often uses her sex appeal, which is very Euro kind of thing to do. And she actually is the one who, when they're given bad orders, is the one who rebel and often say, well, this is what actually is what we should do as a good outcome. So you've got to have that at the back of your head when I start to attack this film, because the fact that Besson has changed it from Valerian and Laureline to Valerian and the Thousand Planets is significant. And I think it actually means he's gotten some things quite wrong for a modern audience. So let's now go to the casting. He's got Dane DeHaan as Valerian. Now, the way Valerian is written in the comic books is, as I just said, like a big hunk guy. He's got a mustache. He's got a million girlfriends. And then you have Dane DeHaan. Now, I think Dane DeHaan is a really good actor, but he is a very different type of guy compared to the way he's been described here. And the way it's written, in the first 20, 30 minutes of the film, like they describe Valerian in really clunky exposition. And Dane DeHaan isn't that guy. And so you've automatically got a big problem here. Then you've got Cara Delevingne as Laureline. And I actually think she is by far the best thing in the film. But she is kind of boxed away and can't... She gets to show off a couple of times and really steal the film, but most of the time they're putting Valerian up first and wow, it doesn't work. The other thing is, this is really a love story in a lot of ways. It's, you know, there's action and all that, but really what they're trying to do is, you know, the love story of Valerian and the girl agent, Laureline. And there is literally no chemistry, anti-chemistry between the two. So that doesn't help. And then the dialogue, especially in the first, 25 minutes, there's a prologue to the film and then it's them. And it is dangerously bad. I mean, so bad that laughably bad. And you are instantly kicked out of the film. So let's go back, because the prologue is great. The prologue shows how the Thousand Planet group of interconnected space stations really started from organic Earth exploration to forming this kind of giant space station where all forms of life have gone, and really the undercurrent is they're all exchanging ideas, and because of that, the whole universe is better off. Then you go to this other race where you're shown this idyllic world, which is absolutely beautiful, and a couple of plot points are placed, and then something horrific happens, and then the movie starts, because Valerian and Laureline have to investigate this mystery, which is on the Thousand Planets, which is this huge space station. And it's actually, I'd worked out the whole plot probably half an hour in. I mean, everything. The plot is fairly simple. So then you've got to go, well, why are we telling this story? And where Besson is great is how he visually tells some of this story. So there's a scene very early on where he explores how it would be to fight in VR, and it's a bit clunky, but it's very interesting. And that's one of the, best set pieces in the whole film. But whenever it has to just go back to story, it is really quite bad. Now, this sounds like I really hated it, and I didn't. It's one of those films where it just came out as average. And the problem is, for a film with a $200 million budget and with Luc Besson directing, it can't be average. Really, the major problem is casting. Dane DeHaan does not work with Cara Delevingne, and then you've got the other people in the cast are Clive Owen, and he really looks like he just turned up for the paycheck. He is really just not caring at all. You have some cameos with Ethan Hawke and Rihanna, which has been well publicized. They're really good. That's a short scene, but that scene's got a lot of energy. But really everything else is very ho-hum. And it's like Besson couldn't take the work from the 70s and elevate it. Now, just to get back to some of the things that really did bother me, there's a real inherent sexism in it. So Laureline is the only one who really seems to know what's going on, and yet nearly every other character of power is a male. And normally I'm not one of these guys who gets hung up on that too much. I mainly look at the technical aspects of filmmaking and stories and such, but this one was egregiously bad, and especially because Laureline turns out to be, in my book, the star of the film, and they've just kind of kept her away and put Valerian forward, and just does not work. So generally, there's not even that much to say in spoilers, because really the film doesn't go anywhere particularly. It's just a normal kind of film. There's no real big giveaway. You'll just work it out by watching it. I don't have too much more to say, actually. I was really disappointed because I was looking forward to seeing a film which was sci-fi, a big summer blockbuster, but which was different to everything else. Not a Marvel or DC kind of comic book film. And we've had a great summer in 2017. So I thought, wow, is this going to be another one? Like, you know, we've had Atomic Blonde and Baby Driver and all these films that just come out a bit more out of left field. And I thought, wow, this could really cap it. And unfortunately, it's disappointing. Be interesting. This will be the one caveat. Is it one of those films that in 10 years from now finds its audience on DVD like Fifth Element did? I did not like Fifth Element at the time. Nearly everything I said you could replay for my criticisms of Fifth Element. And maybe that's what will happen with this film as well. It'll find its audience later on. I'm not quite sure. So look, bit of a short episode this time. That's it. Next time, I'm hoping I'll get to the theater early and see Dark Tower. So I'll talk to you guys then.